Here's an easy way to make people hate you. Go to the beach and start doing this. Da-dum, 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 da-dum. Anxiety, the theme song. All of this from two music notes, the original source being from a 1975 thriller film. Maybe you've heard of it, called Jaws. The main theme is just one of many ways in which the movie made its mark on the world, which I'm sure you all know, but for kicks and giggles, let's list them. The film was a box office smash, being the first film to make over $100 million, overtaking The Godfather as the highest grossing movie of its time. It led to a national paranoia / obsession / fascination / fetish about sharks, much to the chagrin of shark experts and I'm assuming actual sharks. And most significantly of all, it was the first blockbuster, a movie where hordes of people will line around the block to watch a movie. The Exorcist arguably predated this type of film, Star Wars would cement the business model, but the template that all movies would follow was prototyped with Jaws. This movie is a marker in film history. But for its director, it was a job he initially didn't want, a job that turned into a nightmare, but ultimately a job that started his career. And for millions of movie fans, the result is one of the greatest movies of all time. And I'm inclined to agree. What the hell do I say about Jaws that hasn't been said? It's one of the most celebrated, parodied, referenced, studied, and scrutinized movies in cinematic history. For many, it's not just their favorite Spielberg film, but their all-time favorite, period. Its characters created archetypes, its lines became iconic, its camera techniques were copied, its editing was acclaimed, its score was, well, at the end of the day, the film is just a master at manipulating your emotions. Someone somewhere once said that you could learn everything there is to learn about filmmaking by watching two films, The Graduate and Jaws. That's how well made this movie is. So the best I can do is just give my honest opinion. And I'm sorry if much of what I say you've already heard, but in this case I tend to agree with the general consensus. If I had to pick my favorite part of this movie, it would be its characters and their dialogue. In my mind, there's two types of characters. The subtle / low-key, and the loud / colorful. The subtle and low-key type tend to be normal-looking, everyday, regular dudes that are compelling but not super memorable or iconic. Think any Christopher Nolan protagonist. On the other end of the spectrum are the loud and colorful, super memorable and distinct from everyone else, but can come off as too exaggerated and not realistic. Think any Jim Carrey movie. I'm not saying that either one is better than the other, I'm just saying that characters tend to fall into one of these two categories. And what makes Jaws so special is that its three central characters sit perfectly in the middle of this spectrum. They're for the most part regular dudes that could exist, but they're still distinct and full of personality. The one that pushes the realism spectrum a bit is Quint, but Robert Shaw pulls it off with flying colors. Richard Dreyfuss as Matt Hooper is also really enjoyable to watch, being a spoiled nerd who cares more about taking pictures of sharks than anything else. And of course our main character, Police Chief Martin Brody, played by Roy Scheider, is a perfect everyday protagonist to carry us along our quest. Script and direction do an excellent job of portraying Brody's struggles, building empathy for his plights, and most importantly of all, keeping us on edge as he's put into the ultimate danger. Speaking of the direction, let's talk about it, specifically the cinematography from Bill Butler. The standout, surprise surprise, is all the POV shots of the shark. With an unreliable shark, Spielberg and Butler took a page right out of Hitchcock and used this technique to convey both parts tension and thrills. But besides that, there's so many gorgeous shots in this movie, whether it's the grand ocean that the boat sails on, the endless expanse of the beach, or the solitary Quint, high above his reluctant crewmates. It's here where Spielberg let his taste for pictorialism really shine through, a clear influence from his idol David Lean, and something I don't think a lot of people give him credit for. Combine that with Spielberg's expert blocking and direction, and you've got yourself a pretty good movie. Where it goes from pretty good to masterpiece is the editing. A lot has been said about the editing of the film, specifically on the editor herself, Verna Fields. A common story that went around at the time was that she saved the picture, an accusation that really annoyed Spielberg. The people who worked on the project have since said that it was Spielberg and company who made the picture as good as it was, but that Fields more than did her part and truly elevated the film above average fare. And the results are clear to see. Every cut is so expertly placed that the movie flows like liquid. One of my all-time favorite sequences of edits is when these people walk past the camera, hiding the cut and subtly pushing in on Roy Scheider. And every other edit that Fields does is basically perfect. Usually in watching a movie, I think at certain points, maybe it'd be better if they extended this scene or cut this scene shorter or switched angles at this precise moment. But there aren't any in this film that I can think of that I'd change, a true testament to this film's power. With all the praise I've heaped on it, is there anything I don't like? or maybe not that I don't like, but just don't think is as good? Well, believe it or not, my favorite part of the movie is actually the first half, where everyone is running around, discussing the situation, trying to uncover the truth, and just straight up talking. The characters are so good, the dialogue's so well written, and the dilemma is so engaging that I could watch this for hours and not get bored. Once our main trio get on the boat and are off to the sea, I don't know, I'm just not as engaged because the situation has been simplified. There's still great moments, however. Robert Shaw's legendary monologue is as gripping and haunting now as it was all those years ago. The reveal of the shark is one of the most fun jump-in-your-seat moments ever, and when the climax does come, it's such an enormous release of tension that you scream along with Roy Scheider. I just don't find it as interesting for some reason. But either way, it's still a great film from top to bottom. Something fascinating I've noticed with this movie is that at first it was just seen as summer popcorn entertainment, but it has since given way to a pretty large pool of academic study. Much has been said about the film's environment, characters, the meaning of the shark, the techniques that Spielberg used to bring the film to life, and much more. Because of this, somewhat shockingly I must add, it's gained a lot of recognition from film academia, far above other Spielberg films. For example, in Sight and Sound's 2012 director's poll of the 100 greatest movies, Jaws was the only Spielberg film to make the list at a cozy number 76, voted on by the likes of Gareth Edwards and Quentin Tarantino. If I had to guess as to why this movie, out of all his movies, made it onto the list, I'd say it comes down to three things. Its sheer rewatchability, the fact that a lot of time has passed since its release, and if I'm being pessimistic, that it's the least Spielberg-like film that he's made. Now, his fingerprints are all over the actual construction of the movie, but the story and themes that often pervade his filmography, things like a reluctant father and shots of whimsy and imagination, are largely absent. Not only that, but many have made arguments saying that Spielberg relied on the talents of others for this movie. Some say that without Butler's cinematography, Williams' score, or Fields' editing, the film would have been dead in the water. Pun half intended. Which is a bit annoying, I must admit. As much as I like this movie, it's not exactly my favorite Spielberg film. Not because it's bad, but because there's others that I ultimately find superior. You'll see which ones soon. But anyways, it's a sign that Spielberg isn't taken seriously as an artist by a certain section of the cinema elite. But if there's any bright side to this, it's that as the years go on, more and more people will take it seriously, and hopefully they'll do the same for his other work. And hey, if they hadn't paid any mind to this film ever, it wouldn't matter, because the rest of the world already has. Movie that everyone thought of as a campy thriller has cemented itself in box office, critical, and pop culture history. As Spielberg's first big masterpiece, and arguably his true debut, there's no better film to do it with than with Jaws.